Officer Sarah Mitchell had been patrolling the downtown area for 3 years, but she had never received a call quite like this one. The radio crackled to life at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, dispatching her to a local elementary school where a teacher reported concerns about a 7-year-old student. When Sarah arrived at Maple Elementary School, she was greeted by Mrs. Henderson, a veteran teacher with worry lines etched deep across her forehead. The woman led Sarah down a hallway decorated with colorful artwork and handprint turkeys, but the cheerful atmosphere couldn't mask the tension in the air. "It's little Emma Rodriguez," Mrs. Henderson explained in hushed tones. "She's been coming to school with bruises, and today she's been complaining about stomach pain. But what really concerns me is what she said when I asked if she wanted me to call her parents." Sarah nodded, her training kicking in as she prepared herself for what might be a difficult situation. Her K9 partner, Duke, a gentle German shepherd with warm brown eyes, walked quietly beside her. Duke had been specially trained not just for drug detection, but also for victim assistance, particularly with children who might be too frightened to speak to adults. They found Emma sitting alone in the school nurse's office, her small frame curled up in an oversized chair. She wore a faded pink dress that was slightly too big for her, and her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she looked up at Officer Mitchell, her large brown eyes were filled with a sadness that seemed far too heavy for someone so young. "Hi, Emma," Sarah said softly, crouching down to the child's level. "I'm Officer Mitchell, and this is my partner Duke. We heard you weren't feeling very well today." Emma's eyes immediately went to Duke, who had positioned himself at a respectful distance. The dog seemed to sense the delicate nature of the situation and remained perfectly still, his tail giving just the slightest wag of encouragement. "My belly hurts," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. She wrapped her thin arms around her stomach and looked down at her scuffed sneakers. Sarah noticed the way Emma flinched slightly when she heard footsteps in the hallway, and how she seemed to shrink into herself whenever an adult voice grew louder. These were telltale signs that Sarah had learned to recognize during her years of service, indicators that pointed to a child living in fear. "That doesn't sound fun at all," Sarah replied gently. "Sometimes when our bellies hurt, it helps to talk about what's bothering us. Would you like to tell me what's been making you feel bad?" Emma glanced nervously toward the door, then back at Duke, who had now laid down on the floor, making himself appear less intimidating. The child seemed drawn to the dog's calm presence, and for the first time since Sarah had arrived, she saw a flicker of interest in Emma's eyes. "Can I pet him?" Emma asked in a small voice. "Of course," Sarah smiled. "Duke loves meeting new friends, especially brave kids like you." As Emma slowly approached Duke, Sarah observed the child's movements. She walked with a slight limp, favoring her left side, and when she reached down to touch Duke's fur, Sarah caught a glimpse of finger-shaped bruises on Emma's upper arm. Duke remained perfectly still as Emma's small hand touched his head, and Sarah watched as some of the tension seemed to leave the child's shoulders. There was something magical about the way animals could connect with children who had been hurt, offering comfort without judgment or demands. "He's so soft," Emma murmured, a genuine smile appearing on her face for the first time. "He sure is," Sarah agreed. "Duke is very good at listening to kids who need to talk. He never interrupts, and he's really good at keeping secrets when someone needs to share something important." Emma continued petting Duke, and Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out across the child's face. She wanted to speak, but fear held her back like an invisible chain. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned that when asked about calling her parents, Emma had become visibly distressed. The teacher had also noted that Emma often arrived at school early and seemed reluctant to leave at the end of the day. These patterns, combined with the physical signs Sarah was observing, painted a troubling picture. "Emma," Sarah said carefully, "Mrs. Henderson told me that your tummy has been hurting for a while now. Sometimes when kids feel scared or worried about things at home, it can make their bellies feel really bad. Is there anything happening at home that makes you feel scared or worried?" The change in Emma was immediate. Her hand stilled on Duke's fur, and her whole body seemed to tense up again. She looked up at Sarah with eyes that held far too much knowledge for a 7-year-old. "I don't want to go home," Emma whispered, and the words seemed to take all of her courage to say. Sarah's heart clenched at the quiet desperation in those 6 words. She had heard similar confessions before, but they never got easier. Each time she was reminded of why she had chosen this profession, and why moments like these mattered so much. "You don't want to go home," Sarah repeated gently, validating Emma's feelings. "That must be really scary to feel that way. Can you tell me why you don't want to go home?" Emma's eyes filled with tears and she buried her face in Duke's fur. The dog remained perfectly still, as if he understood the weight of the moment. Sarah waited patiently, knowing that rushing a frightened child would only cause them to retreat further into themselves. The school nurse, who had been quietly observing from her desk, caught Sarah's eye and nodded toward a folder on her desk. Sarah understood that there was likely documentation of Emma's injuries and absences, evidence that would support whatever the child was about to reveal. As Emma continued to find comfort in Duke's presence, Sarah prepared herself for what she suspected would be a heartbreaking confession, but she also felt a surge of determination, knowing that this moment could be the beginning of Emma's journey towards safety and healing. Duke seemed to sense Emma's distress and gently nuzzled his nose against her cheek, offering the kind of unconditional comfort that only animals could provide. The simple gesture broke through Emma's walls, and the tears she had been holding back began to flow freely. "My daddy gets really angry," Emma whispered into Duke's fur, her voice muffled but clear enough for Sarah to hear. "He throws things and yells really loud. And when Mommy tries to help me, he gets even madder." Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression neutral and supportive. She had learned early in her career that children needed to see strength and stability from the adults trying to help them, not the anger or sadness that their stories naturally evoked. "That sounds really scary, Emma," Sarah said softly. "Nobody should have to feel afraid in their own home. You're being very brave by telling me about this." Emma pulled back from Duke slightly and looked up at Sarah with tear-stained cheeks. "Last night, he pushed Mommy down the stairs. She said she was okay, but she was crying and holding her arm funny. I hid in my closet with my stuffed elephant until everything got quiet." The school nurse quietly handed Sarah a tissue box, which she passed to Emma. As the child wiped her eyes, Sarah noticed more bruises on her wrists, small and round like fingerprints from someone gripping too tightly. "Emma, when your daddy gets angry and hurts you or your mommy, that's not okay," Sarah explained gently. "Kids should never have to worry about getting hurt at home. Can you tell me about the bruises on your arms?" Emma looked down at her arms as if seeing the marks for the first time. "He grabbed me when I tried to help Mommy. He said I was being a bad girl and that bad girls get punished. But I wasn't being bad. I just wanted to make sure Mommy was okay." Duke shifted slightly, positioning himself even closer to Emma, as if creating a protective barrier around her. Sarah marveled at the dog's intuitive understanding of the situation. His training had prepared him for moments like this, but his natural empathy made him truly exceptional at providing comfort to traumatized children. "You are not being bad, Emma," Sarah said firmly but kindly. "Wanting to help your mommy shows what a good, caring person you are. Children should never be hurt for trying to help someone they love." Mrs. Henderson had been standing quietly in the doorway, but now she stepped forward with a concerned expression. "Officer Mitchell, Emma missed school 3 days last week. When she came back, she said she had been sick, but now I'm wondering if there were other reasons." Emma nodded slowly. "Daddy said I couldn't go to school because people would ask questions about the bruises. He made me stay in my room and said if I told anyone what happened, he would hurt Mommy even worse." Sarah's heart ached for this little girl who had been forced to carry such a heavy burden. The isolation tactic was unfortunately common among abusers, cutting off their victims from potential sources of help and support. "Emma, I need you to know that telling me about this was the right thing to do," Sarah said. "You're helping to keep yourself and your mommy safe. Sometimes grown-ups need help from other grown-ups to solve big problems like this." The child looked worried. "But what if he finds out I told—" "He said he would know if I talked to anyone and he would make Mommy disappear." Sarah felt a chill at the threat, recognizing the sophisticated psychological manipulation that abusers often use to control their victims. Emma was only 7 years old, but she had already learned to live in constant fear of the consequences of seeking help. "Emma, I promise you that there are people whose job it is to keep kids and mommies safe from people who hurt them," Sarah explained. "My job is to make sure that you and your mommy don't have to be scared anymore." Duke seemed to sense the conversation was reaching a critical point and gently placed his paw on Emma's leg, a gesture that brought a small smile to her face despite her tears. "He's really smart," Emma said, stroking Duke's paw. "It's like he knows I'm sad." Duke has helped a lot of children who have been through scary situations, Sarah explained. He has a special gift for understanding when someone needs a friend. He wants you to know that you're not alone anymore. Emma was quiet for a long moment, seeming to process everything that had been said. Sarah could see the conflict playing out in the child's expression, the desire for help warring with the fear that had been instilled in her through months or possibly years of threats and violence. "Will you really make sure Mommy is safe?" Emma asked, her voice small but hopeful. "I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure both you and your mommy are safe," Sarah promised. "But I'm going to need your help to do that. There are some people I need to call who specialize in helping families in situations like yours." Emma nodded slowly, then surprised Sarah by wrapping her arms around Duke's neck in a tight hug. "Thank you for bringing Duke to meet me," she whispered. "I was too scared to talk before, but he makes me feel brave." Sarah felt tears prick at her own eyes as she watched the bond between the child and her K9 partner. She had seen Duke work with many victims over the years, but there was something particularly moving about watching him provide comfort to someone so young and vulnerable. As Emma continued to hold on to Duke, Sarah began to formulate her next steps. She would need to contact Child Protective Services immediately, and she would need to ensure that Emma and her mother had a safe place to stay while the situation was investigated. The father would need to be arrested, but it would have to be done carefully to ensure the safety of both victims. "Emma," Sarah said gently, "I need to make some phone calls to start helping you and your mommy. Would you like to stay here with Duke while I do that? He can keep you company." Emma nodded, still clinging to the dog who had somehow managed to give her the courage to speak her truth. As Sarah stepped into the hallway to begin making the necessary calls, she could hear Emma whispering to Duke about how soft his ears were, and how she wished she could have a dog just like him someday. The investigation was just beginning, but Sarah knew that this moment, this connection between a frightened child and a gentle K9, had already made all the difference in the world. While Emma remained in the nurse's office with Duke, Sarah stepped into the hallway and immediately contacted her supervisor, Sergeant Rodriguez. The situation required careful coordination between multiple agencies, and Sarah knew that moving too quickly could put both Emma and her mother in greater danger. "We need Child Protective Services here immediately," Sarah explained into her radio. "And I'm going to need backup for a potential domestic violence arrest." The suspect may become violent when confronted. Within 20 minutes, social worker Maria Santos arrived at the school. Maria was a seasoned professional who specialized in child abuse cases, and Sarah felt relieved to have someone with her expertise on the scene. However, when Maria entered the nurse's office, Emma immediately shrank back against Duke, clearly frightened by the presence of another unfamiliar adult. "It's okay, Emma," Sarah said gently. "This is Maria, and she's here to help too. She works with families to make sure kids are safe and happy." Duke seemed to understand the situation and moved himself between Emma and Maria. Not in an aggressive way, but creating a buffer that made Emma feel more secure. The dog's instinctive understanding of human emotions continued to amaze Sarah. "Hi, Emma," Maria said softly, sitting down in a chair several feet away to avoid overwhelming the child. "I heard that you've been very brave today, and that Duke has been a good friend to you." Emma peeked around Duke to look at Maria. "Are you going to take me away from Mommy?" she asked, voicing the fear that many children in her situation carried. "My job is to help keep you and your mommy together and safe," Maria explained. "Sometimes that means finding a safe place for both of you to stay while we make sure the person who has been hurting you can't hurt you anymore." Sarah watched as Emma processed this information. The child had been living in survival mode for so long that the concept of safety seemed almost foreign to her. But Duke's presence continued to provide her with an anchor of calm in the storm of adult conversations and decisions swirling around her. "We need to go get your mommy now," Sarah explained to Emma. "She doesn't know that you've told us what's been happening, and she's probably worried about you. Would you like Duke to come with us?" Emma's eyes widened with hope. "Can he really come?" "Duke goes wherever he's needed," Sarah smiled. "And right now he's needed with you." The plan they developed was careful and methodical. Maria would stay with Emma and Duke at the school while Sarah and her backup officers went to the Rodriguez home to ensure Emma's mother's safety and arrest the father if he was present. They would bring the mother back to the school, where the family could be reunited in a safe environment. As Sarah prepared to leave, Emma suddenly grabbed her sleeve. "Officer Mitchell, what if Daddy hurts Mommy when you go there? What if he knows I told?" Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, her heart breaking at the worry in the child's voice. Even while seeking help for herself, Emma was more concerned about her mother's well-being than her own safety. "Emma, I'm going to bring other officers with me, and we're trained to handle situations like this," Sarah assured her. "Our job is to make sure your mommy stays safe. Duke is going to stay here with you and he'll keep you company until we bring your mommy back." Duke seemed to understand his assignment and moved closer to Emma, resting his head on her lap in a gesture of comfort and protection. The child's small hand automatically went to his fur, finding solace in the contact. 25 minutes later, Sarah and 2 backup officers arrived at the Rodriguez home, a small duplex in a neighborhood where the houses sat close together, and the sound of domestic disputes often carried to the neighbors. Sarah had reviewed the case file on the way over, and learned that police had been called to this address twice before, but both times the mother had refused to press charges. When they knocked on the door, a woman answered who Sarah immediately recognized as Emma's mother. She had the same dark hair and brown eyes as her daughter, but her face was marked with fresh bruises, and she held her left arm stiffly against her side. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Officer Mitchell. We need to speak with you about Emma. She's safe at the school, but we have some concerns about her welfare." The woman's face went pale, and she glanced nervously over her shoulder. "Emma, what happened to Emma? Is she hurt?" "She's not hurt, but she's told us about some things that have been happening at home," Sarah explained gently. "We're here to help you and Emma stay safe." Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes filled with tears, and Sarah could see the conflict playing out in her expression. Relief that someone finally knew their secret warred with terror about what her husband might do if he discovered that Emma had spoken up. "He's not here right now," Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. "He went to work, but he'll be back soon. If he finds out that Emma said anything, he'll kill us both." "Mrs. Rodriguez, you and Emma don't have to live in fear anymore," Sarah said firmly. "We're here to make sure you're both safe, but we need your help. Are you willing to come with us to see Emma? She's very worried about you." The mention of her daughter seemed to strengthen Mrs. Rodriguez's resolve. Despite her own fear, her maternal instincts kicked in, and she nodded slowly. "Let me get my purse," she said quietly. As they drove back to the school, Mrs. Rodriguez told Sarah about the escalating violence in her home. Her husband had become increasingly controlling and violent over the past year, and she had been too frightened to seek help, convinced that he would follow through on his threats to hurt Emma if she ever tried to leave. "Emma tried to protect me last night," Mrs. Rodriguez said, tears streaming down her face. "She's just a little girl and she threw herself between us when he was hitting me. That's when he grabbed her arms and shook her. I should have protected her better." "You're protecting her now," Sarah replied. "Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is accept help when it's offered." When they arrived back at the school, the reunion between Emma and her mother was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Emma ran into her mother's arms, and both of them cried as they held each other tightly. Duke watched from nearby, his tail wagging softly as he witnessed the family beginning to heal. "Mommy, I told them about Daddy," Emma whispered into her mother's ear. "I was scared, but Duke helped me be brave." Mrs. Rodriguez looked over at the German shepherd who had played such a crucial role in her daughter's rescue. "Thank you," she said to Duke as if he could understand every word. And perhaps Sarah thought he could. With Emma and her mother safely reunited, Maria Santos began the delicate process of explaining what would happen next. They were taken to a family crisis center, a comfortable facility designed to feel more like a home than an institution. The center provided temporary housing for families in situations exactly like theirs, offering both safety and support services. Emma was initially overwhelmed by the new environment, but her anxiety decreased significantly when Sarah explained that Duke would be visiting them regularly as part of the ongoing support process. The K9 Victim Assistance Program allowed for continued contact between traumatized children and the dogs who had helped them, recognizing the importance of maintaining these healing relationships. "Will Duke remember me?" Emma asked as she explored her new room, which was painted in soft yellow and decorated with cheerful artwork created by other children who had stayed there. "Dogs have excellent memories, especially when it comes to people they care about," Sarah assured her. "Duke will definitely remember you and he'll be excited to see you again." Over the next few days, While Emma's father was arrested and charged with domestic violence and child abuse, the healing process began for both Emma and her mother. The crisis center provided counseling services, and Emma quickly bonded with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery. Dr. Walsh was impressed by Emma's resilience and the progress she made in just the first week. "It's remarkable how much that initial interaction with Duke opened her up," she explained to Sarah during one of her visits. "Emma talks about him constantly, and she started drawing pictures of him. The connection she made with him seems to have restored some of her trust in the world." Indeed, Emma's drawings covered the walls of her room. There were pictures of Duke in various poses, sometimes wearing a police badge she had crafted from construction paper, sometimes sitting next to a little girl who looked remarkably like Emma herself. In one particularly touching drawing, Duke had wings and was flying above a house, protecting the family inside. Mrs. Rodriguez was also making progress in her own healing journey. The physical bruises were fading, but the emotional recovery would take much longer. She attended therapy sessions and support group meetings with other domestic violence survivors, slowly rebuilding her sense of self-worth and independence. "I feel so guilty that Emma had to be the one to speak up," she confided to Sarah during one visit. "I should have been strong enough to protect her from the beginning." "Survival takes many forms," Sarah replied gently. "You kept yourself and Emma alive through an incredibly dangerous situation. That took tremendous strength. And when the opportunity came for both of you to be safe, you took it. That's what matters now." 2 weeks after the initial incident, Sarah brought Duke for his first official visit to the crisis center. Emma had been counting down the days, and when she saw Duke walking up the sidewalk through the window, she practically bounced with excitement. "Duke! Duke!" she called out as she ran to meet him at the door. Duke's tail wagged furiously as he saw Emma, and he greeted her with the same gentle enthusiasm he had shown at their first meeting. It was clear that the bond between them had not diminished during their time apart. During this visit, something magical happened. Emma, who had been speaking only in whispers since arriving at the center, began talking to Duke in her normal voice for the first time. She told him about her new room, about the other children she had met, and about the therapy sessions that were helping her understand that what had happened to her was not her fault. "I'm learning that I'm not bad," she told Duke seriously, stroking his ears. "Dr. Walsh says that kids are never responsible when grown-ups make bad choices. And she says that telling you and Officer Mitchell about what was happening was the bravest thing I could have done." Sarah watched from across the room, moved by the obvious therapeutic value of the interaction. Duke listened to every word Emma said, his intelligent eyes focused on her face, offering the kind of non-judgmental acceptance that was so crucial to her healing process. The visit had another unexpected benefit. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been struggling with anxiety and panic attacks since leaving her abusive marriage, found herself calming down significantly when Duke was present. The dog seemed to have a soothing effect on the entire family, creating an atmosphere of peace and safety that extended beyond his visits. As the weeks passed, Emma began to thrive in ways that amazed everyone involved in her care. She started attending a new school near the crisis center, where teachers were aware of her situation and provided additional support. Her grades, which had suffered during the months of abuse, began to improve dramatically. She also began making friends for the first time in years. During the worst period of the abuse, Emma had been too frightened and ashamed to connect with other children. Now, freed from that constant fear, her natural personality began to emerge. She was funny, creative, and remarkably empathetic for someone so young. "I think maybe I want to be a police officer like Officer Mitchell when I grow up," Emma announced one day during Duke's visit. "And I want to have a partner like Duke so I can help other kids who are scared." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled at her daughter's declaration, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from her since they met. The woman was beginning to rebuild her own life as well, enrolling in vocational training courses and slowly developing the skills and confidence she would need to support herself and Emma independently. The legal proceedings against Emma's father moved forward, and with Emma's testimony and the evidence of abuse documented by the school and medical professionals, the case was strong. Emma was initially frightened about the prospect of testifying, but Dr. Walsh worked with her to prepare, and the court arranged for Duke to be present during her testimony as an emotional support animal. Having Duke there made me feel like I could tell the truth without being scared, Emma explained later. It was like having my best friend right there with me. Father was ultimately sentenced to several years in prison and was issued a permanent restraining order that prohibited him from contacting Emma or her mother. For the first time in years, both Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez could breathe freely, knowing that they were truly safe from the man who had terrorized them. 6 months after that tearful afternoon in the school nurse's office, Emma Rodriguez stood in the backyard of her new home, throwing a tennis ball for Duke during one of his regular visits. The small house her mother had rented was modest but filled with warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the fear and silence that had characterized their previous living situation. Emma had grown taller and stronger, her face now brightened by frequent smiles and the carefree laughter of a child who no longer carried the weight of adult secrets. Her bruises had long since healed, but more importantly, the emotional wounds were healing as well under the careful guidance of Dr. Walsh and the unwavering support of her mother. Duke, catch, Emma called out, throwing the ball high into the air. The German Shepherd leaped gracefully, catching the ball mid-flight in a display of athleticism that never failed to delight Emma. Mrs. Rodriguez, who now went by her maiden name of Carmen Martinez, watched from the back porch where she was enjoying coffee with Sarah. Carmen had completed her vocational training and was working as a medical assistant at a local clinic. The work was fulfilling, and for the first time in years, she felt proud of her independence and ability to provide for her daughter. She's like a completely different child, Carmen observed, watching Emma play with Duke. Some days I can hardly believe this is the same little girl who used to hide in her closet and cry herself to sleep. Sarah nodded, equally amazed by Emma's transformation. Children are remarkably resilient when they're given the chance to heal in a safe environment. Emma had that strength inside her all along. She just needed the right circumstances to let it shine. The changes in Emma extended far beyond her home life. At her new school, she had quickly become one of the most popular children in her class, known for her kindness toward other students and her willingness to help anyone who seemed sad or scared. Her teacher, Ms. Johnson, had mentioned to Carmen that Emma seemed to have an unusual ability to connect with children who were struggling, often gravitating toward the quiet or withdrawn students. I think her experiences have given her a special kind of empathy, Dr. Walsh had explained during one of their sessions. She recognizes pain in others because she's lived through it herself, and she has an instinctive desire to help because she remembers what it felt like to need help. This empathy had manifested in beautiful ways. When a new student named Michael started at Emma's school, clearly struggling with his parents' recent divorce, Emma had immediately taken him under her wing. She sat with him at lunch, included him in playground games, and even shared stories about how scary it could be when families were going through difficult times. Duke's regular visits had become a highlight, not just for Emma, but for the entire neighborhood. Word had spread about the special therapy dog who visited the little girl who had been so brave, and other children often gathered around during his visits, drawn by his gentle nature and obvious intelligence. Sarah had been amazed to see how Duke seemed to recognize and respond to other children who might be struggling. During one visit, he had approached a shy boy named Tommy who lived next door and rarely spoke to anyone. Within minutes, Duke had the boy laughing and playing, and Tommy's mother later confided to Carmen that it was the first time she had seen her son truly happy, since his father had deployed overseas with the military. These interactions had given Sarah an idea, and she had approached her department about expanding the K9 Victim Assistance Program. With Duke's obvious success in helping not just Emma but other children as well, she proposed regular community visits where Duke could interact with children who might benefit from animal-assisted therapy. The program was approved, and Duke began making weekly visits to local schools, community centers, and other facilities where children gathered. His gentle presence and intuitive understanding of human emotions made him perfect for the role, and soon requests for visits were coming in from across the county. Emma had become Duke's unofficial ambassador, often accompanying Sarah and Duke on their community visits. She would tell other children about how Duke had helped her find the courage to speak up when she was scared, and she would demonstrate how to properly interact with therapy animals. Duke taught me that it's okay to be scared sometimes, Emma would tell the children they visited. But he also taught me that there are always people and animals who want to help, if you just let them know you need help. These visits had an unexpected benefit for Emma as well. Helping other children gave her a sense of purpose and pride that accelerated her own healing process. Dr. Walsh noted that Emma's confidence and self-esteem improved dramatically when she was able to use her experiences to help others. The legal aftermath of the case had also concluded successfully. Emma's father had been sentenced to 5 years in prison and would be required to attend anger management and domestic violence intervention programs before his release. The restraining order would remain in effect indefinitely, ensuring that Emma and Carmen could continue their new life without fear of his return. Emma had testified via closed-circuit television with Duke by her side, and her brave testimony had been instrumental in securing the conviction. The judge had commended her courage and had made special mention of the K9 assistance program that had made her testimony possible. "Your Honor," Emma had said during her testimony, "Duke helped me remember that there are good people in the world who want to keep kids safe. That's why I could tell the truth." As the first anniversary of their rescue approached, Sarah planned a special celebration. The police department was hosting a community event to raise awareness about domestic violence and to showcase their victim assistance programs. Emma and Duke would be the guests of honor, sharing their story to help other families understand that help was available. Emma was excited about the event, not because she would be the center of attention, but because she hoped their story might help other children who were living in fear like she once had. If even one kid hears about Duke and decides to tell someone about being hurt, then everything we went through will have been worth it, Emma told Sarah as they planned her presentation. Standing in her backyard now, watching Emma play with Duke, Sarah reflected on the profound impact that one moment of connection between a frightened child and a gentle dog had created. Emma's courage had not only saved herself and her mother, but it had led to the expansion of programs that would help countless other children in the future. Duke trotted back to Emma with the tennis ball, dropping it at her feet and wagging his tail expectantly. As Emma bent down to pick up the ball, she wrapped her arms around Duke's neck in the same way she had that first day in the nurse's office. But now the gesture was one of joy and gratitude rather than fear and desperation. "Thank you for helping me be brave, Duke," she whispered into his fur, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. "You'll always be my hero." And in that moment, Sarah knew that no matter how many other children they helped in the future, the bond between Emma and Duke would always be special, a testament to the healing power of compassion, courage, and unconditional love.